Welcome to Business Spotlight, where we share insights, reflections, and pearls of wisdom from some local business owners. My name is Ceri James. I'm a business coach and a facilitator. But today, the spotlight is firmly on Tomislav Simnett, Managing Director of Initforthe business, initforthe.com. And a big welcome to you, Tomislav. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very well. Looking forward to our discussion. Let's get stuck in, please, Tomislav. Now, I'm intrigued by your title on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the history of your business and what you specialize in. Purveyor of Happiness, Time Lord, business automation specialist, and software engineer who speaks human. Love to hear a bit more about that, Tomislav.
Yeah, I guess you don't hear many of those, do you? So Purveyor of Happiness, the Initforthe is on an absolute mission. You can see up here, we've got smiles, Initforthe smiles. We build software that people genuinely love to use and they find themselves genuinely smiling at. Now that's a bit weird sometimes for people to experience smiling at some software, but they do. And the reason we do that is our mission is to make every single member of staff across every single organization globally fundamentally happy at work. And that comes out of a learning that we've seen, that 70% of people are unhappy in their work. And a big part of that is through stress. And a big part of the stress comes from poor systems and poor direction and poor processes. And if we can solve some of those problems by building intuitive systems that work for those people who are in the business, not just the people at the top of it, the business improves and becomes more profitable. The people become happier. They stay longer. There are fewer training overheads. There are fewer, there's smaller staff turnover, and they become more productive as well because of the reduction in stress and the reduction in context switching. So that's what that Purveyor of Happiness is, and the Time Lord. We genuinely give back so much time to the people in the business and therefore the business as a whole that and I'm a bit of a sci-fi fan to boot. So that's where the Time Lord thing comes in. And I've been a software engineer since since the tail end of the 80s. I was 6 when I started coding. And I'm 40 on Monday. So
very good. So what might be a typical client for you then, Tomislav?
So our typical client, we have a really broad range of clients. Our largest client is 175 people that we've just taken on. And they've got people out on the road doing jobs, vans out on the road, and they have office staff. And our smallest is actually a 3-person IT support company based not far from where we are in Knutsford. So a complete variety from one end of the spectrum right to the other. But our key focus is on growing businesses, companies who really want to accelerate their growth and stand head and shoulders above the competition, and understand that to do that, you need to continue to change. They typically look like around about 25, 30 people, primarily because of the pain point that businesses suffer at that point in time. Because they suddenly realize that they have to systemize and they have to automate their processes. And if they don't do that, and they don't do it well, their growth through the corporate stages of business, if you will, become really, really challenging. Sometimes even impossible. And at that point, if you haven't done it, and particularly today, if you haven't done it, someone else will. But traditionally, if you haven't done it by that point, your costs are going to skyrocket. Your overheads are going to skyrocket. You're going to need more staff. Your profit margins are going to shrink. And that's certainly not what we want in this particular environment we find ourselves in, but in any environment.
But talking about the environment there, Tomislav, how long have you been going, and what has been the impact of the significantly turbulent environment of the last 3 years, please, on your business?
So it's interesting. We've been going since 2004. I actually started the business in my bedroom at university to build what we now describe, I guess, as a virtual learning platform for a language school in Essex. That was the very first job Initforthe did. And that was me writing the software way back when. I took it full time a few years later, 4 years later in 2008. And we've seen, so as you can imagine, we've seen the financial crisis of 2008. We've seen, and we've seen COVID and the pandemic, and then and now with various crises all bundled into one, I guess. The impact on the business, we've learned a lot, but we've also grown. The impact on the business over the last 3 years is that we've seen more and more people focus heavily on automation and systems and processes and try and solve some of the problems that when you're no longer next to each other in the office, you can't just shout across and hope someone knows. You need those processes in place. And actually having those processes in place allow the business to work really effectively remotely, reducing their overheads, reducing their office requirements, all sorts of stuff like that. And so we've just seen an uptick in requirement for that.
Great. And in terms of the growth and development of your business then, what would you say are the main challenges today?
The biggest challenges are, well, two sides. On the one hand, I guess our competition is off-the-shelf software. Any old piece of software that purports to do what your business does. And a big part of what we do is education. So we have to educate people on often why those tools that look great on the surface actually hinder the business. Maybe not in the short term, because you may have started with paper, so anything's slightly better than nothing. But certainly in the medium to long term, you find yourself driving 150 miles an hour into a 10-foot thick concrete wall, and then that's the end of you. The other side of it is actually comes out of, in a big part, out of Brexit, and that is finding great engineers. We are really fortunate that we have a place in the market, both on the customer side of things, for the way we work with clients, and we've won so many awards around our client focus, but also that stands us in good stead in the engineering community, so that people, when they look at working with us, we can find the right and the best people. We don't hire at the middle level of engineers. People saying they're senior but really not. We really hire at the Google level of engineering experience, and we have in the past hired away from Google. So that's what we're really about, is engineering excellence, but also that real focus on people and people.
Great. And speaking pure human.
Absolutely.
Not just code technology. Very good. Now, what about the future then, Tomislav? You started talking about your mission, so it's great to hear a mission-based organization. What about your aspirations for the next 5 years or so?
So the next 5 years, well, I mean, the mission, going back to the mission drives what the business does and how we make commercial decisions. We're not about taking as much money out of our clients as possible. We're about returning value to them, and making huge return on investment for them. Now, because we're focused on happiness and we know that those things all fall into place, we're here for the next 100 years. We're here for way beyond my lifetime. Our mission, by definition, isn't actually achievable by me on my own, or by my business on its own. It's more than a mission. It's more of a movement that I'm trying to create here. So the next 5 years is that we grow probably by about 3 or 4 times over the next 5 years, so that we can deliver that to more organizations and more people and more individual people at work, and we can make them happier. That's really everything it's about.
Very good. Now, what about the lessons that you've learned, Tomislav? You mentioned 2008, I think you said you started. If you were going to reflect on the experience and learning for the last, 15 years or so. What advice would you give yourself on day one if you were starting again based on that experience?
It's an interesting question. I started the business with nothing. I had a computer. That was in 2004. And when I went full time, I had a mortgage and a credit card with enough runway for 2 months. So if I was to look back and say, would you do it again? Yes, 100% I would, because it gave me real motivation. I had to succeed or I had to make a decision to stop. And here we are, 14 years down the road from there, and successful in our own right. There's a long way to go to be truly successful, I think, and whether we ever achieve that kind of pinnacle of that, I don't know, but I look at it as a journey. What advice would I give myself? It's a really interesting question to reflect on yourself and say, what could you have done differently? I think the biggest learning that I can take is to trust my gut more.
Mm-hmm.
Trust my gut more. In business, I think a lot of people in business or who go into business I've come from an entrepreneurial background. My parents had businesses as I was growing up and so on. But I think a lot of people go into business and they're cautious. We're not actually gamblers. We're not people who gamble away our money, but and I didn't have any, but actually I should have followed my gut more than I sometimes followed my head.
And so are there 2 or 3 quite kind of large mistakes that you think you made that you learned a lot from? And if so, what would they be?
Yeah. So sometimes keeping people on longer than they should have been, mm-hmm. At very difficult points in the business. As a business owner, I've nearly sold the business 3 times through my own stress of running the business. And I've nearly gone bankrupt a couple of times as well through and learned lessons along the way from there. So yes, so keeping people on too long is going to hurt your business in a massive way. At the same time, this is interesting because I won't work with clients that want to make redundancies off the back of automation. Because if they're growing and they have opportunity, leverage the people in the business to maximize that opportunity. So yeah, that was one big lesson. A big lesson that I learned when I was on the verge of selling the business. It was the 11th hour and I pulled out of the deal. And that was a really fascinating moment for me because I'd spent a lot of time reflecting on what I was doing, what I would do next if I would actually do this, and whether this was the right decision. And interestingly, the business who was going to acquire mine made some changes to their timetable that made me pause for thought. They brought forward their own timetable for their own exit, which meant that my return was going to be less than halved, or more than halved, down to less than half of what I would have taken from the deal in the first place. And it stopped it being worth it for me. Now, when I went back to the business owners, and this is one of those times when I did go with my gut, and this is, a lesson to me. Sometimes it's what you do and you go, actually, I should have done more of this. I went back to the business owners of that business and said, look, I can't do this deal. One of the business owners, an old friend of mine, said, no problem at all. Do you still want to come to our Christmas party? At the Christmas party, the other owner, his business partner, said, just don't come running back in 6 months' time when you want to do the deal again. 3 months later, they went bust.
And so you mentioned there were 2 other times that you nearly sold the business. So was there a theme to why you changed your mind, or very different circumstances?
They all related to periods of stress. Now, some of that stress was external, some of it was business related. There's a whole mixture of different things going on. But in each of those times, I spent a bit of time reflecting on what I would do otherwise. And when I came down to it, I realized that the business's mission of happiness is really my mission of happiness. And I can't deliver that anywhere else. And I could go and get a job, and I could go and get a high paid job somewhere, but it wouldn't interest me. Or I could go freelancing, and that just doesn't, I'm just not interested in it. And so I sat there and thought, well, what else would I do? And when it came down to it, the answer was, this is a Hobson's choice. I have to do this. And it's not through necessity because there is no other option that's available to me. There are plenty of options that are available to me, but this is what drives me. And so I have to do this because it drives me.
So why do you think you got yourself into that situation 3 times? Is there any learning or reflections there, Tomislav?
I think there were different things that happened each time. One was money, one was having the wrong people around me, and can't even remember what the third was now. But yeah, they were different lessons that I've learned from. And actually, over the last 3 years, the business has grown and flourished, and we've got a really, really solid team here that all drive in the same direction. You know, we're all on that skull. We're all rowing in the same direction, doing the right thing, and so heavily focused on the happiness of our clients' teams.
Very good. Well, it's been really fascinating to hear about your journey, Tomislav. One final question. In terms of the viewers of the Business Spotlight, any you've talked about the complications of systems and automation. Any information or any offers you'd like to share?
Yeah, so change can sometimes feel a bit daunting, and particularly if you've got systems in place already. A lot of people will tell you that you need to replace everything all at once, and that just feels like this great big nasty change that's going to hurt everyone. And actually, if you do that, it will. So we've got a way of making that change happen over a period of time, so it doesn't have the same impact. So it has a real positive impact across the entire business instead. What I'd love to do is offer everyone out there a free consultation call to have a chat, just to help you out, understand where you're at, what the opportunities are, and how you can take your business forward, and really give your team everything they need to make your business a success.
Well, that's great. Well, I spend a lot of time talking to business owners about their systems, how they fit together, what the opportunities are for automation, across winning business, delivering business, the financial side, and the people management, the human side. So anybody with any of those challenges, I'd certainly encourage you to have that conversation with Tomislav. Tomislav, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ceri.
And all the very best with your business.
Thank you very much.